Hello, hello. Sorry I cannot be with you in person, but I'm so glad to get to share a little bit more today. We are going to go ahead and take a look at independent learning and some ways that we can foster that. So we're going to look at building routines that work. I'm going to give you kind of three of the biggest keys, steps, ways that we can do this. Obviously, think of this like a buffet. Take what you want, take a little bit of something and a lot of other things, whatever you think might work for you. Okay. The goal here is to foster independent learning. So there's a lot of reasons why we might want to do that. Let's go ahead and start with this. Why independence matters. So in the first place, we are really empowering kids when we do this. We're building their confidence and motivation. I remember seeing this from a young age. And again, we've seen this probably in asking kids to do chores. I've seen this in kind of teaching our kids to cook little by little, right? We're going to start with stirring the bowl, maybe licking the spatula, and then moving into cracking an egg, and then maybe adding multiple ingredients, measuring the ingredients, and then finally doing the whole thing on their own, right? We're not going to let it all fly at once. We're going to build up. So building confidence is a huge part of this. The second one is super important and something that I think we overlook in homeschool a lot, which is reducing burnout. Burnout is real. I feel like in the past few years, I've gotten to meet a few homeschool families, help with classes or certain parts of their homeschool journey. And then family says, hey, we are actually going to go back to school, traditional school this year. And I'll say, why? What's up? What's not been working? Let's see if we can fix this. And they just say, it's just too much for me. Yeah, I'm just burnt out. And so I think a lot of times this is one of those missing pieces that when we build independence in, it allows the adults in the room to still do things, have a little bit of rest, potentially work. I mean, that's part of how our company with Think Curio works, as well as my husband's work. We are able to set up these routines in a way that allow our kids to run a lot of their learning. And sure, there's choice involved, there's check-ins involved, but it's not 100% on me. That's been a really big piece of, being able to manage this over the years. And then finally, third, encouraging problem-solving skills. We're going to use the term executive function a lot today. And again, close your eyes, think about CEO. A CEO is the chief executive officer. They are executing, making decisions and executing those decisions throughout the day. When we think about the functions that we're asking our kids to do as learners, as managers of their time, these are the things that we want them to kind of strengthen over time. And when we give them these little chunks of independence as littles, and then upper elementary, middle, high school, we're giving them the opportunity to flex those muscles so that when we get to college, when we get to graduation, we are seeing them make the most of their time, make the most of the gifts that they have, make the most of the strengths that they have, and not necessarily just whittling away their days, we hope, right? So this is a big reason why we're going to look at independence, all right? So when we're thinking about fostering independence, here are the three biggies. If you want to take a little screenshot, take a picture, this is what we're going to work toward, okay? The first one is work blocks. Again, I'll get into all three of these in more depth here in just a second, but work blocks, this just means focus time. I mean, think about your calendar, whatever app you use to manage your calendar. You might have a 2-hour block for basketball practice. That's on my schedule today. So from 4 to 6, we've got basketball practice, and that's a big chunk of my day. But that's just one of the blocks. The work blocks in my day, for me, happen to be very early in the morning. For my husband, middle morning and the afternoon. We've got a lunch block. We've got an evening block. I've got an evening work block, right? So having work blocks for ourselves, if we have jobs, but also for our schoolwork. That's a huge thing. This kind of enhances productivity and helps get that routine in place. And the second thing is choice. Again, we want those executive functions to start to be built up, right? So giving them choice and saying, okay, you've got these 3 things, these 4 things, these 5 things, these 6 things that we need to get done. what would you like to start with? Or what makes the most sense? Or what do you enjoy the most? Or simply, what's the priority? None of this might be enjoyable to you. Unfortunately, that's the case right now. Hopefully later it won't be the case, but as we move forward, we need to figure out what needs to get done and what can fall by the wayside if there's simply enough time. Does that sound like your day? I mean, sometimes the laundry doesn't get done, but lunch needs to get made. So my priorities switch, right? So this is the type of thing that we're talking about. This is that choice factor that's going to build up their executive functioning skills later on. The third one is self-regulation. Sometimes we talk about this in terms of our emotions, right? If I'm feeling overwhelmed, if I'm feeling tired or sick, if I have less time today than I thought I did, or if I'm just lacking motivation and I want to be doing something else and not what is happens to be in front of me right now, that's kind of what we're dealing with. So figuring out what makes sense in order to make those choices, use that self-regulation to say, I want to do this thing. I'm going to say no to that, and I'm going to focus on what's really and truly the priority of this moment. That self-regulation is huge. So go ahead, jot those down, and we're going to move forward with our first one. So work blocks. When we talk work blocks, like I mentioned, think of this like your calendar. We're going to figure out the structured learning times that we have during the day. And I want you to let go of the typical school schedule that you might have in mind. So a lot of times it's going to be, a 6:30, 7:30 wake up. We start school around 8:30. We homeschool until lunch. That's a typical school day. For the older kids, it might extend into the afternoon, but for our family, that's actually pretty typical. But I know families who, for example, parents are working in an industry where they happen to be free on Monday and Tuesday because maybe they work at a restaurant. And Wednesday to Sunday are work days for them. So for the family, they pack most of their school day into, or their school week in this case, into Monday and Tuesday. And the rest of the week is, activities and self-guided work and things like that. So think about your structure, and I want you to kind of breathe a little bit easier when it comes to what that absolutely has to include and how it could be flexible if there is kind of a question of burnout potentially, especially with the need for more of an adult's time if you find yourself needing to work or your work schedule is less flexible than you'd like it to be. This is one of those things that can help. So figure out your work blocks. Again, the typical work blocks will be like a morning work block and an afternoon work block. You do you. I know families who have kids that don't get up until 11 o'clock. I wouldn't recommend that, but this is what that family chose. They stuck to it and they felt like it worked really well for them. They tended to stay up later at night. That's fine. So for them, sleeping in later was good. Allowed the parents to get some work done in the morning, and they tended to do school in the afternoon. So let go of those preconceived notions. Next one, number 2, is using tools. So incorporate timers, music playlists, or virtual checklists visual checklists to engage and to create a little bit of an organization factor in their learning atmosphere. We've done this in a lot of different ways over the years. We've used tools like Google Keep. If you use Gmail, you already have Google Keep. So on your Gmail dashboard on the right side, there's a little light bulb, a little yellow light bulb icon. That's Google Keep. And they are just virtual checklists. So if your child is at an age where they have an email account maybe, and they're already kind of managing their schoolwork on their own, this is something that they can use to keep a checklist. This also works on the mobile app. So find a way to do your checklist. If you've got younger kids, what we've done, what other families have done, you can create like a photo checklist. So take a picture of your child, practicing piano, take a picture of your child, brushing their teeth, take a picture of your child, putting their dirty clothes away. And that picture then becomes part of their checklist. So so-and-so is going to clean their room, check, because they can see the picture. So even pre-readers can have these checklists. Once they get a little bit older, for example, a few of our kids have these right now. They sat next to me while I created their checklist. They said, "Oh, I typically do these three things together. I make my bed, brush my teeth, and get dressed for the day all at the same time. So let's put those in one line." I thought that was great. They're kind of task stacking. For those of you who are Atomic Habits fans, that's a good way to do it. If I do this one thing, these other two are going to come with me. So having a checklist of their own. If you don't have access to a laminator, totally fine. Get some clear packing tape. That's what we do. I rarely laminate things anymore. So just some clear packing tape, slap that on, put it on the fridge or on a wall in their room or even a clipboard. That way they can take it around with them throughout the house when they are doing their tasks and their schoolwork. I would also say from the adult side of things, managing schoolwork or plans, I love using Notion, which is a free web-based tool, notion.io or SO. Notion.so. And you can plan out your tasks. There are plenty of AI planners. I also like using Ed Cafe, is a great way to kind of get those plans in printable form and either share them digitally through Google Suite, kind of Google management tools, or printing them out and having them in paper form is also great. So again, use tools, demonstrate, model what this can look like. Next one, consistency. So having consistency is fantastic. I don't need to detail that for you. But I would say that figuring out some sort of schedule where you know almost always this is going to work for you. Obviously, there will be holidays, there will be visits, there will be other things that pop up. But being able to maintain that schedule is really important. And with homeschool, a lot of times we might say, "Oh, we can do school later." Well, yeah, you can. You have that flexibility. But also, this is a priority. And we do need to figure out a time. If it's not going to happen today, are we really going to double the time tomorrow? Or should we make a little time today to make it happen? I would say that you can kind of plan around this. For example, our family has decided to do homeschool Monday to Thursday. And Friday is Fun Friday. So we barely do any schoolwork on Fridays. And that helps keep appointments in check. You know, the appointments aren't interrupting everything. We're meeting up with friends on Friday typically. We're going out to different places, to the library, to the park. So it's a good easy yes day to have that day for us marked off on our calendar. And I rest easier. It also doesn't kind of strain me as the adult who's kind of planning some of these things to know, okay, great, Friday, we can push that task or push that appointment or push that play date to a day when I know we're free. All right, moving on to our second key of this independent learning idea, which is empowering them through choice. Autonomy is really important. And I think a lot of times with little kids, we often say, "Nope, we're going to do this, this, and this." And kids are more capable than I think we give them credit for. I've seen this firsthand, and I've also seen the opposite, where I've seen parents make all the choices for their child, and later on, when it does come to choose, to making a choice in class or something they want to, follow up on or dig deeper on, kids just really have no curiosity, and it makes me wonder, do you have those, choice muscles to be able to say, "I love this. I really want to do this way." Having choice in learning can look different in a few different ways. And let me give you a few examples so that this might kind of open your mind to what this looks like. This isn't just, do you want to do math today or do you want to do language arts today? No. We're going to do all of it. But here's what we can choose to do. Do you want to do this first? So like the order of things. Again, like I mentioned before, this could be an order of ease, of preference, or just plain priority. We have to get this done because something else is happening and this is a more pressing matter. This could also look like how we want to do something. So method. How do I want to learn? We've got to learn about this piece of history. We've got to learn about World War II. Do I want to do a Nearpod lesson on it? Do I want to interview someone about it? Do I want to read a book about it? Do I want to do research on it? What do I want to do? That's interesting. Okay. So it might be a mix of those things, but having the choice gives them a little bit more autonomy and thinking, okay, how do I receive this information best? That's important. The other way that this can play out is in the method of showing their learning. So, do we need to learn to write essays? Sure. Does it always have to be an essay? Heck no. Please give them choice in how they present their learning. If you've got a kiddo who loves to craft, let them make the battlefield. Let them show some timeline in artistic form. Let them design something on Canva. Let them shoot a video and learn to edit it in a web editor, right? These are things that are super affirming of their interests and their gifts and allow for developing some other skills as well. I've seen this in my own kids when they watch me edit YouTube videos, for example, in Canva. Some of my kids were like, huh, we could do that. Or, hey, could I, make an invitation on Canva? They kind of got curious about Canva and wanted to know how they could use it. So all things that you could do. And I would also give a little plug for AI here. If you are unsure of the options that you could provide your kids, ask for AI, yeah, ask AI, ask ChatGPT, your AI of preference. I think I mentioned Ed Cafe before, but that's another good option to say, hey, I'd like to give, 5 options for method, how they want to learn, and 5 more options of how they could show me what they know. So use it for brainstorming, use it for planning, use it to make a little menu. That's fine too. Let's go to our next one, must do, may do boards. So these visual boards, again, a clipboard is a fantastic tool to have on hand. They can just carry it around with them and, check off. I must do math, language arts, and I don't know, my music practice. I may do science, or I may do social studies today, but the one that I don't choose today, I have to do tomorrow. Right? So this is the sort of thing that we're asking them to prioritize their time with and make those choices. Increased ownership. So when kids figure out that they have a choice in their learning, when they have ownership, when they have a say, they're going to develop, may surprise you. I also find this happens a lot when we've got some accountability. And in particular, I've seen this recently with my 3 oldest who are in some of our Curio classes at thinkcurio.com. So these are book clubs and a public speaking class. And when I say, hey, you've got public speaking today, immediately it's, okay, what's the theme? Something that smells good. Oh man, I gotta go find, can you help me think through what we have? And I'll just point out some things. Great. And so there my son goes and he is preparing his little presentation for his public speaking class. For my daughters in our book study class, they are on it. They're, hey, do we have a copy of the book yet? Do we have the audio book yet? Should I reserve it? Can we get a copy at the library? Can I go ahead and print my book study? Who's in my section, so that they can kind of figure out how the discussion might go, right? So these are the types of things that you see the ownership kind of take root. And dare I say, it's a social pressure in a good way. So quick Melissa story, if you will. When I was in middle school, high school, my pride was getting those straight A's. My pride was being the brown noser teacher's pet who, would do well on whatever they gave me. However, did I learn the stuff? No, not necessarily. I learned how to game the system. So it's that social pressure in a way where they want to prepare, they want to be set, but it's not just to get the grade. Does that make sense? So this increased ownership, this is my learning. It's not just gaming the system to check all the boxes and get a good amount of feedback on it or something. Okay, so responsibility in their learning. All right, our third benefit here, these emotional skills, self-regulation, executive function. Okay. I am giving you a handout with some information on it. One of the best places that I've found to learn about executive function skills is a woman named Carrie Bonnet. Carrie lives in Portland, Oregon. She and I are internet friends. We've helped each other with certain projects online. And I have learned so much from her in terms of what this means for different groups. For adults, adults with ADHD, kids with dyslexia, kids with regulation issues, processing issues, kids who are just frustrated or angry, right? There are things that we can do to support. And a lot of times they're really trivial, but they are really helpful. So one of the things that we use a lot are timers. Now, I would love to have been with you in person, but as I'm not, I'm going to go ahead and turn on this timer. Now, we're on Zoom right now. We're recording this on Zoom. So this is just a Zoom timer. But did you know you can just open up Google Chrome or your browser of choice and type in 10-minute timer. Enter, and the timer starts. And it's just running. Okay, this is something that we do a lot for screen time. You got 12 minutes on an educational website. There you go. Set your timer. I want to see it. I can walk by. I don't even have to ask them, hey, how much time is left? I can see it. It shows on the tab. But I know he's got 7 minutes left. I'm not going to bother him, but I am going to circle back in about 7 minutes because I can do something else in the meantime. So this is something that's visual. It's right there. It's something that they can reference, right? So timers are great. Visual cues. This is not necessarily, again, I would consider this probably a homeschool thing to avoid, but setting up that daily schedule, 8 to 8:30, we're going to have our welcome circle. 8:30 to 9:30 is language arts. And the chunks of time, not necessarily, right? That's not necessarily what we mean. But visual cues. Hey, I'm working through X amount of this language arts packet before I move on to my next thing. Giving them kind of a road sign to say, okay, great, this means I am ready to move on. That is what we're looking for. Okay, so timers, visual cues, and helping them manage their time better. Whatever that looks like, it might mean kind of a kitchen timer or other ways that you would find to manage time. But I'll leave you with that. There are on your handout some visual cues, some task chart, chore chart type things that you can check out. I've left a couple links on there as well. Daily check-ins. So for this one, fostering kind of some reflection is really important. Something I learned really early on was having kids evaluate themselves in really light ways, I might say. So they're not assigning value. They're not giving themselves an 8 out of 10 or whatever. It was just choosing what was best. We're not focusing on what went terribly. We're choosing what was best. So here's a really low level example, and then we can go up higher. But for low level, if we're thinking about helping kids learn to write their letters, okay? This is a source of huge frustration for a lot of kids, especially with tiny hands who may not be ready to form letters. Don't force your kids to write before they're ready, okay? But if they're excited about it, if they're starting to, draw, doodle, scribble, whatever, and they're enjoying it, great, go for this. So if they're doing some writing, I might say, hey, can you circle the best letter D that you wrote? They'll do it, and they will pick the best. And it's wild because then oh, they do know what's expected of them. And they do see that they did it well. So it's a self-affirming thing. It's this thing that kind of self-regulates, right? They're saying, okay, I know what's expected of me, and I see that I can manage at least one of them. And then the best part is when they do, 5 fantastic Ds, and they're like, I don't know, they're all great. Good, circle them all, let's move on, right? We don't have to dwell on this, but this is one of those things where it's a piece of reflection. Another one, with Curio, we have these writing challenges. They're daily writing warm-up journals, but we've also got some STEAM creativity writing challenges. And at the end, there's always a reflection. They always go back, and it's kind of prompting them to edit themselves. But just to reflect, did I look for punctuation? Did I check my spelling? Did I look for correct grammar? Okay. So now I'm going back and saying, oh, shoot, I forgot all of the punctuation that I should have added. right? And you have these moments of saying, wow, do I go back and edit and really change, or do I leave it? And this is going to be cause for a conversation later, either affirmation to say, hey, great job, you were able to do that. That might be the end goal. And we might start out on the other opposite end and saying, no, I don't want to go back and change it, right? Oh, yikes. We need to work toward that kind of self-editing, self-regulation type moment. So having these little check-ins is really important. A rubric can also be really helpful. And again, another plug for AI, another plug for Ed Cafe. There are so many ways that you can create a rubric based on state standards, if that's what you're using, to say, okay, according to Virginia Standard of Learning for third grade writing, this is what we would be looking for in a piece of writing that shows plot development, right? We're starting here, we're moving on through the sequence of the plot mountain, if you will, kind of an exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution, right? We want to see that in their writing. Is it there, right? And they're going to be able to kind of reflect themselves on what they did, and maybe having another voice doing that review with them, that reflection with them would be helpful. All right, next one is teaching calm down tools. So calm down techniques such as breathing exercises and breaks. We weave this into our day. I bet you can already think of what you do when your child is overwhelmed or what they like to do. For our kids, most of the time it's movement of some sort. They've been sitting for a while. It's time to get up. So we have tasks that are 15, 20-minute tasks, basketball, an instrument, drawing, reading something that they actually want to read. The best way to do this is getting into another environment. So if they've been sitting on the couch doing math, or if they've been sitting in a chair doing language arts, go get them in a hammock. Go get them on a beach towel in the grass. Go get them in a lawn chair outside, right? Sunshine is your best friend a lot of times to calm down, having a break. And if you're still hearkening back to the school days, remember there were recess breaks, 15, 30-minute recess breaks where kids would go wild, run around, scream their heads off. Give them that chance. Whether they're tiny, whether they're older, it might look like reading a book of their own, reading a magazine of their own, reading, I don't know, a graphic novel of their own. Give them that choice. Give them that time to decompress and then re-enter the academic world when they're ready. All right, here is an example of what this can look like. So a daily schedule, again, using those time blocks, those learning blocks to figure out when or how long we need for certain activities. And don't forget, schedule in music. That's part of school. Schedule in some playtime. Schedule in sports. Schedule in art. This is really important, and it's part of your day. So make sure that's in there and that is a valid choice. Include family times where it's not just, again, if there's more than one kiddo involved, I would say make sure those times where they can come together and spend time with others, but also if you've got one kiddo or kiddos that are spaced out in age, make sure they've got the time to meet up with kids their age during the day, whether that be, again, sports or in the neighborhood, time to play together, inviting them over. This is just another opportunity to teach them those soft skills, those intangible skills, generosity, sharing, prioritization, and planning. Again, giving people a heads up is really important too. And those skills are seen when we're socializing with other people. Flexibility and choice, again, giving kids the ownership over their own learning and the independence to make those choices. Again, don't be afraid to start young, and you can always rein in if you've kind of let the choices run a little rampant, but giving them choice, giving them parameters, those visual schedules, visual checklists are really helpful here. So giving them flexibility and choice is important. All right, making progress. So as we progress in helping our kiddos to develop these skills, because it's not going to happen overnight, we are hopefully going to see the following things. All right, we're going to see fewer meltdowns. I know with my kids, we've seen this when we give them a chance to choose what they want to do first, give them the choice as to how they want to attack a certain subject that day. If I can tell that sitting down to do a language arts lesson in our book is just not going to work, I might say, hey, let's go read together today, and we'll work on a few spelling words using chalk outside. How does that sound? Yeah, yeah, I just feel like I need to move. That's cool. That's great. Having the ability to make the choice in how you teach and how they do their work, their daily academic work, is really important. More independence. So again, without the constant reminders, guilty right here. I'm sure there are other hands going up around the room. Go ahead and raise your hand if that's you. But more independence means less nagging. Nagging is the other word we could sub in here. I was trying not to use that, but without the constant reminders of, hey, have you done language arts? Hey, have you done math? Have you finished your instruments today? Gosh, nobody wants to hear that. So figuring out ways to bolster their own, regulation and those executive function skills is really important. So timers, schedules, visual and or written, and then making it so that these things are visible to other people. If I walk by one of my kids' checklists and I can see all these things are checked off, I might whisper some, hey, awesome job. I can see that you are really on it today. Or I might be able to say, hey, I can see that this topic, maybe math, took far longer than it usually does for some reason. Hey, do you want to take a break from one of your instruments today? The relief on their face, right? It's like how you feel maybe when a meeting gets canceled, or when you really had a lot on your plate and one of those things gets taken off your plate by somebody else. Oh, it's relief, right? Let's afford the same courtesy to our kids. And task completion. So again, feeling this achievement of finishing a task. Maybe it is finishing a book, when you finished your math book for the year or your language arts curriculum, or for example, in those writing warm-up journals that I mentioned that we have for Curio, at the end of everyone, there's a certificate of completion. We want you to throw a party. We want kids to feel that sense of achievement. If you happen to go to a public school or a traditional school, there were units, right? Units of study that kids are working through, and being able to kind of check the box, close the book on that chapter. It's really important. So task completion and that sense of achievement. All right, we're winding down, my friends, but these challenges are going to come up. They are going to rear their heads as we work to implement these independent learning practices. So are you going to see some off-task behavior? Absolutely. You are going to have kids that do not listen to their timer or mute their timer on purpose, or just forget about the thing on their to-do list, right? So it does take some time to get used to. It's a new schedule. It's a new, tool that we're using in our tool belts. So it does require some modeling on our part, some patience on our part. But I would say the modeling is really important. Being able to say, hey, I'm using a visual schedule too. Do you want to see my schedule? And pull up your Google Calendar with all the colored blocks and stuff like that. Yeah, this is how I keep track of what I need to do. Whoa, that's pretty cool. Sometimes I'm often a pen and paper person on the day-to-day, so I will show my kids my scribbled to-do list and say, hey, you have helped me check off one of the things on my to-do list. Thanks. Right? These are some things that we can model for our kids. Second is resistance to work. I feel like this is always going to be on there, and it could be that your kid is a stellar, student, and they just love completing these things, but there is going to be a time when they just don't feel like it, right? And I think it's important to help kids recognize those feelings and say, hey, it's okay. We do need to power through in some areas, but let's work together and figure out a way to make this more palatable. Maybe we can change the output of your work. Maybe we can change how you learn about this thing. Would you prefer, I know you love reading, would you prefer to read a historical fiction book about this time period versus, reading a textbook about it or something like that, right? There are options. So giving those options helps us avoid the resistance to work. And then frustration and meltdowns, especially with our younger learners, but believe me, it does not always end when they get into middle school. And I'm sure high school parents will agree that there are still going to be those meltdown days. It is always okay to take a step back. I think this is something that we need to take more advantage of in homeschool. But there are times when it is not going to happen. It would be better for everyone just to take a breather, go somewhere else, go outside, scrap the schoolwork for the day. Okay. But that does not mean we give up on the schoolwork. We will return to it, but it is recognizing that frustration and those moments of tension do not need to be where we must, keep our fist wrapped tightly around whatever was on the plan that day. So hold it with a loose hand and be ready to adjust if needed. All right, so first steps. I want you to think about work blocks. How does your day work? How does your schedule work? Be willing to figure out kind of a creative way that you might be able to schedule your day. Using these blocks, they might be 10 minutes if you got a tiny. I always love, recently I put out a video with 3 things that I tried to do every day when our kids were in preschool and kindergarten, and thinking through, okay, we might not sit down and do the curriculum, but I know that there are 3 things that I want to do. I want to do something with their hands. I want to get them writing something. And I want them right? I want them like moving around, jumping from all the capital letter A's on the sidewalk and avoiding the lowercase a's, or jumping on the circles and avoiding the triangles and rectangles and squares, right? Those sort of things that involved gross motor movement, fine motor movement, and some sort of creativity. Those 3 things were things that we really tried to incorporate, but they only each took like 10 minutes. So with littles, that might be what it looks like. With the older kids, it might be multiple 30-minute blocks, and they might bleed over into the afternoon or something like that. But be willing to figure out what your child needs. And again, could look different in terms of not necessarily Monday to Friday and those regular kind of typical school hours. Then figuring out choice. What can you let go of in terms of how something must be learned or demonstrated? If you can, offer some options. We talked about Nearpod in our first homeschool seminar, but that's a fantastic tool to offer choice. Using literature is a fantastic way to offer choice. If you've got somebody who's more of a reader and less of a studier, they might grab on to the story in the historical fiction novel and really come to understand that time period better, and then start to ask the other questions and get the answers that they need. But they might say, okay, well, why was railroad such a good industry to be in during the Industrial Revolution? Why was iron a really good industry to be in during this period? These are questions that we might be able to then dive into with a little bit more gusto once they've read a historical fiction book based in that time period, potentially about the Carnegies or the Vanderbilts or something like that, right? Finally, reflect daily. So giving some self-awareness to say, hey, you guys, today was tough, wasn't it? This might be while you're brushing teeth, getting ready for bed, or it could be closer to that academic time, whenever you find the time, but being able to have that conversation to say, hey, this went well, or this did not go super well. This could be a weekly thing, a quarterly thing, a semester thing, but it is important to figure out what works and what doesn't work. All right, it is your turn. I want to hear your questions, your ideas. I'm sure you're already doing some of this. Again, like I said, this is more of a buffet than a fixed menu. So take what you need from this. I hope it was helpful. If you do have questions, feel free to comment on this video. I would look forward to seeing those questions, and please do enjoy the handout. I hope that's helpful, and those resources are all for the taking. As always, I am happy to connect. You can head to thinkcurio.com to learn about what we do with Curio, classes, resources for homeschooling families and families looking for a little bit extra when it comes to learning. On socials, we are Think Curio Learning, and our YouTube channel, which is Think Curio Learning. Again, that's where I put a lot of these videos. And if you'd like to email me, I am found at info@thinkcurio.com. And would love to connect with you guys. I hope this was helpful and look forward to see you guys in the next go around.